The next session is mostly about the semantic search capabilities, new features in this area, and about the semantic maps, where Jeroen and Nischay will show us a lot of new features that were added in the last version of semantic maps. So, Jeroen.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. So, this talk is about all the cool new features in the last release of Maps and Semantic Maps. But before I start, I'd like to get an idea of who actually is already using one of these extensions. Please raise your hand. Okay, so that means I won't have to cover the basics that much, I guess. And I do have to apologize. I searched for an appropriate lolcat related to mapping, and this is all I found. So if you know something better, then please send it to me so I have something for my next talk about these extensions. A quick overview of my presentation. First, I'm going to quickly recap what these extensions are for the people that don't know them yet, and do a quick overview of the basic functionality, just some demos. And then the main part of my talk is, of course, the demos of the new stuff. So I'll mainly be doing demos in the talk, not, yeah. So it's a pretty light talk. And then a quick look at the roadmap. And then we finish up with questions. So Maps allows you to do a bunch of different things. Its foremost purpose is to allow you embedding of dynamic maps, such as Google Maps or OpenLayers, into your MediaWiki. It also supports geocoding, which is transforming addresses into actual coordinates, which you can just feed to a parser function and get the coordinates back for some purpose. It also supports coordinate parsing and formatting, so you can feed it coordinate notation in, coordinates in some notation, for instance, degree, minutes, seconds, and get them back in some other notation. And then the last point is that it supports geospatial functions, such as calculating the distance between a number of points, or calculating a destination, giving a starting point, a direction, and a distance. Semantic Maps is an extension built on top of both Maps and SMW. And it adds a geographic coordinates data type to SMW, so you can define a property of type geographic coordinates. Of course, you want to be able to query these and have them visualized in a nice way. So Semantic Maps also adds several result printers that allow you to query these and aggregate coordinates onto a map. And it also extends the semantic forms extension by adding a form input that enables you to just click on a map to input the location or to look something up in a search box and then preview it on the map and save that without manually having to enter coordinates. So some quick demos of this basic functionality. One thing I forgot to note at the start is that the documentation of both extensions used to be on a separate wiki, but I now moved it to the SMW wiki. So if you search there for maps examples or semantic maps examples, you will find a list, which is pretty comprehensive, that has covered, where you can find examples for most of the functionality. So this is a very simple example of how you can display a map. For this, you use the display map parser function, and you can just feed in some coordinates, or you can actually feed in an address directly, and then the map will show up in your wiki. You can also just display multiple points. And of course, all these maps are fully interactive, so you can zoom, you can switch to other layers. It's a bit slow here now because, the internet. Okay. Then semantic maps allows you to write ask queries where you can get the coordinates put onto a map. So nothing too fancy here. Go ahead.
Can you have addresses here as well?
You cannot, yeah, not directly. So if you have properties that hold addresses, you cannot query them directly onto a map. But what you can do is use the geocode parser function to transform these addresses into coordinates and then save these in your properties and query directly for these. So this is what a lot of people do, and this also tends to save you calls to the geocoding service. You can also, of course, query additional information related to these points. And these will then be, if you click on the marker, displayed in a pop-up above. And you can, well, by default, this is just displayed as a simple list, saying property, name, and then the value. But you can also format this output using a template, and that's what's shown here. Yeah, this is actually perhaps a bit more exciting example. What this query does, it's a distance query, which allows you to query for all locations within a certain distance of some point. So this is querying for everything within 420 kilometers of Brussels, I believe. And then the template that's used to format the contents of the pop-ups is using the distance parser function, or to actually calculate the distance of every point that's being visualized from the source. So, yeah.
Is it how is it the straight distance? I mean, how the birds flies, or is it distance with respect to roads?
It's not the distance with respect to roads. It's at the moment it's a very simple implementation. It's basically creating a bounding box and not caring about the curvature of the Earth, which is why this one is actually showing up here, which you would not expect. But I mean, it's still good enough to get everything that's roughly in some area, right? Yeah, this is something that could be improved in the future, but yeah. So, the last big release, which is version 2.0, was pretty recently in October. And it's a bit special in a way that it was 10 months after the last release before that. And it's never been such a long while between releases for maps, which is mainly because I've been doing other stuff and not been working on it that much. But a lot of other people have contributed in the meanwhile, and we actually reached over 400 commits by 20 different developers. And a lot of new features got added. I think there is no other release that added this many new features, except perhaps the initial release. So now I'm just going to go over some of the most interesting new features and quickly explain them and demo them to you. So the releases of Maps before 2.0 did support Google Maps version 3 to some degree, but this was still very basic because Google Maps version 3 was just released. So the main mapping service there was Google Maps version 2. This is now switched to version 3, and it no longer has support for version 2. So if you have a wiki and you didn't change the default mapping service, then it will now switch to Google Maps version 3. Oh, yeah. I didn't really mention this earlier on, but you can specify which mapping service you want to use. So you can specify if you want Google Maps or OpenLayers, or if you want to use OpenStreetMap, depending on your preferences and needs. And this is pretty cool because now we support a number of features that are new in Google Maps 3 itself, such as Street View, support for various layers and fusion tables, which I will demo now. Please quit downloading torrents in case you're doing that. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with this feature, right? But now you can do it in your wiki as well, in Maps. Yeah.
Do I see semantic data in this video then?
Not yet, no. So this is an example using some of the layers that Google Maps supports. So you can say that you want to view the traffic layer and the biking layer, and then the map gets changed to also show these, right? Yeah, the traffic layer is, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not completely sure, but yeah.
Sure. That's what you do. No. I mean the traffic. Can you define your layer on your own, right? You actually can define a layer on your own.
These layers are the system layers of Google Maps. You cannot define them on your own, but the thing I'm currently trying to demo is using Google Fusion Tables, which basically allows you to do something very similar. And this is a very eye-candy example, if it loads, which is currently refusing to do so. Yeah, I'll come back to this example later. The big new feature in this release is that we now support various geospatial shapes. So you can display polygons, rectangles, circles, and lines in your maps instead of just simple points. And it works in both Google Maps and OpenLayers. And I do have to note that this is almost all implemented by Kim Ek. He did a lot of great work here and also added a lot of the other functionality I'm showing off now. So yeah. So this is an example of a map with such shapes. Yeah. Of course, it's a lot of wiki text to define this. I mean, if you go draw a polygon, then you have typically a lot of points. So you see the wiki text gets a bit verbose, which you probably do not want to go enter manually, which is why Kim created a map editor for this. Where did it go? Here it is. Yeah, okay. Which allows you to just put points onto a map. Yeah. It's a visual editor, right? You get the ID. It's pretty simple. And it allows you to change a lot of different properties of all the things. And one of the great features it has is that it allows you to export this to then wiki code you can put into your page, and it also allows to import it again, which I will now do with the code from here. So I'll just copy it. And now I can click import, add the text, and yeah, my laptop is having problems with the screen size. So now you can see that the shapes got added. So if I zoom in, you can see it's the same map, right? And now you can go ahead, edit it, and put it back in. Of course, you can, well, the obvious improvement here is to have it somehow inline, that you don't have to go to the special page because it's located at special map editor. This is also linked from all the examples on the wiki. So, so this is the example that didn't load earlier, which is using Google Fusion Tables, which is a service they have where you can have data and do various stuff with it. And one of the things you can do with it is display it in Google Maps. So you can, if you have a Google account, just go create these Fusion Tables and import stuff. And then you can just refer to it here with the number and have it displayed on a map. Yeah. Yeah, it's a data source. So all the things you see here, all the dots and the things from the pop-ups is coming from this Fusion table. And yeah, this is an example of something, a GPS track I recorded with my phone and then just uploaded to Fusion Tables and now can display on a map in my wiki. So back to the polygons. I think this is a pretty cool feature, is that you can, or at least it looks very cool, that you can specify they should only be shown when you hover over them. So yeah, this is nice for highlighting regions, right? And yes, I know I forgot Luxembourg there, but yeah. It's just an example, right? This is also pretty cool, and a feature that's been requested from the first presentation I did about this 3 years ago. Since if you have a lot of points, it tends to get a bit annoying that you have over 9,000 markers on your map, and that also makes it slow, especially in the old Google Maps version 2. But now we have support for marker cluster, which you can turn on for Google Maps very easily with this parameter. And then it will group nearby locations. And if you then zoom in, it expands and shows the individual locations if you zoom in enough. Yeah, so you can see as I get closer, it splits up and shows you the individual locations. Another pretty neat new feature is that you can now search through markers. So a lot of the time you have a whole bunch of markers on your map, and it might be difficult for a person that's looking for a marker corresponding to a certain page or topic to find where it is without clicking on all of them. So now you can enable a feature where the user gets a search box on top of the map. Okay. And can search through the available markers. So you can see I have a bunch of locations here. And if I only want the things that have, for instance, capital in the title or the description, I can just type that, and it will live filter the markers based on what you're typing. So you can turn this on very easily with the search markers parameter, which supports 3 different modes. First of all, off, but you can choose to filter on all the text, so both on the title and the description, or you can choose to only filter on the title, for instance. So if I go type capital here, then it won't show anything anymore because there's nothing with capital in the title. One thing to note about this particular example is that it's not using the parser function you saw earlier, but the tag extension, which does pretty much exactly the same, except that the syntax is a bit more convenient for specifying multiple points. Instead of having to separate them by semicolons, you can put each point on a separate line and it will recognize it's a different point, and then separate additional metadata with the pipe. We also have some support now for static maps, which are non-interactive maps. So as you can see here, you can drag it, you can zoom it. It's static, right? Yeah. You can now also specify the minimum and the maximum zoom of your map. Again, this works with both Google Maps and OpenLayers. So as you can see here, the zoom bar is a lot smaller than it is by default. So now I can only zoom in to this particular level and not more. Another pretty nice feature that is currently only supported for Google Maps is the definition of ground overlays, which means images that you can put on top of the map. And this is also supported by the map editor, so you can use the map editor to place the image, to select it from somewhere and choose the size. So you can see here we have a giant SMW logo on the map, so you can zoom further and then it will be even more, well, look even more big, right? And you can of course click on it. Yeah.
Can you make it transparent?
I'm not sure. This is quite possible. For at least the polygons and the lines and stuff, you can control the opacity. Which you saw in the hover example. You could actually still see what was below the various polygons. This is also a feature that got requested several times before it got implemented, which is the automatic opening of info windows. Because a lot of the time you have just some points and you want the things to immediately show without the user having to click on them. So here they open immediately after you go on the page without having to click on the markers. And this is turned on using the auto info windows parameter. Okay, we're almost through all of the cool name functionality. You can see it's quite a bit. We now support markers that link directly to a location. So if you click on them, instead of a balloon opening with additional information, it will take you immediately to the corresponding page. So if I click here, then I will go to the page of Germany on this wiki, where the information is coming from. And again, you can specify this via the map editor. via the graphical user interface there, or you can just use the pretty simple syntax, which is prefixing the title with link, colon, and then you will have link instead of it being shown as a title. And there are several more new features, but I'm not going to demo all of them because this would take too much time. You can now click on locations and copy their coordinates if you enable this, so that users can paste them somewhere else if this is needed. For Google Maps, you can enable or disable the points of interest overlay. For OpenLayers, you can now group markers. I'm actually not completely sure how this works because I haven't tried it out. I mean, too many features for me to try it all out. You can now resize maps. If you turn this on, users can click on the lower right corner and drag it. I mean, it just uses the jQuery resizable plugin. You can display inline labels for Google Maps, which means labels that are displayed directly on the map. I think the Polygons example, the initial Polygons example, had one of these showing Berlin or something. And now we can also have markers that change when you click on them. So users know on which ones they clicked already, so then the icon changes.
What's the difference between marker grouping and marker clustering?
Marker grouping allows you to define groups. So you can say this marker is in this group and the other one is in the same group. And then you can, I think, specify an icon for the whole group or something like that. And marker clustering is something that's automatic based on their proximity. And that then aggregates them into one icon. And while creating all this new functionality, well, the people of you who already use maps for a while will probably know we have several parser functions. We have display map for just displaying a map without any points on it, and then we have display points and display points for displaying a map with points. And now the road we went down is if you want to specify lines, you need to use this parser function, and if you want to specify polygons, you need to use this one. And if you want to display both polygons and lines, you're sort of out of luck. And of course, this is incredibly ridiculous, so we decided to ditch all of them except the display map one, which can now do everything. So this is a lot simpler and yeah, does not have lame restrictions. There are also a few removed features. I already mentioned Google Maps version 2, but Yahoo Maps also got ditched because, well, it's no longer supported and developed by Yahoo. So, and we temporarily disabled the not much used feature that allowed you to embed maps, OpenStreetMap maps generated on the Foundation tool server. On our roadmap are images as layers. This is something that's been there since version 0.6 or something, but only in a very experimental stage. It was really a proof of concept, and I suspect it's broken now because I didn't test it during the last releases. But great news here, Daniel Werner, who is also sitting here and will be giving a talk later about something, is working on this and has made great progress, I think, in getting this to a more usable state. So I hope this will be in one of the next releases. Also, you've seen these polygons, which is great, but of course you want these in SMW, right? In several ways. You want to be able to, well, store them and then just browse through them using special browser, stuff like that, but then also query on them and visualize them on maps, much the same way as points. And you want to be able to filter on them, for instance, get all the points in a certain polygon. And this is where Nischay will talk a bit more about. The visual map editor could be more integrated. Already mentioned this. Of course, I would like to get your input on what more stuff we could do. Feedback is always welcome. And you can find these slides on GitHub. For some reason, I created 2 links, but well, you can view them and just get the source because it's a web page. And well, do we have some time for questions?
Actually, you've been eating your own time for your next talk during the last.
Yeah, but I started 10 minutes late, so.
I have only one small question. If you have a map and you click on Google, you go to Google Maps itself, but usually you lose all the points and the markers and the information. Yeah, is it possible to?
Oh, you mean if you create a service link that links directly to maps.google.com, that you then lose the information when you click on it, or?
If you on all the maps you have on the left, you have Google. If you click there, you go to Google Maps itself. But then all the markers, etc.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you mean, but we can talk in person after the presentation. Okay. Yeah. Now, Nischay is going to talk about the work he's doing on getting these geospatial shapes, these polygons, to work in SMW.
I think I can better do a lightning talk if you don't have time. Yeah, I'll do a lightning talk. Okay? Huh?
It's enough time since we started late.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the work I did was like, I did for OpenUrban. They are a project who are trying to document all the construction projects in and they are using maps for this and semantic maps for this. So like this is a map where you can see all the constructions that are going on, and these are arranged according to like which is building and which is transportation, lane and other stuff. And then you can click on them. These are using all the functions that Jeroen showed just now. And okay, they have some text over there, which you have to use to query all these shapes. Okay, so what I did was to use the new shapes feature. So you can like put shapes of this instead of these points, because like buildings and like stations are more better demonstrated using shapes. So okay, so how do you enter a project in here in this wiki? Is like you enter all this data in this form where you can also put the point, and when using the shapes you have another feature. Actually it is experimental, so I'll just give you a small demo still. Okay, so this is experimental, so it's just named project with polygons. So here you have an extra field polygon where you can like use the special map editor. It is embedded in here as a form input, so you can add a shape in here by after. You can also zoom in there, and then you can add this stuff. It's somewhat broken because of so much experiments going on there, and then you can select this polygon. It will get filled in here. Okay, so and then you can save this project after filling all the other data. Okay, so I won't show that much of it. Okay, and then you can also enter like a polygon in this format, and then you can use semantics in there. You can put a polygon. Polygon is a property that I have defined. It has the geographic polygon type, which is a new type introduced in Semantic MediaWiki, and it's basically saved as a blob right now. because we don't have support for geospatial data types in the backend. But then you can save it, and I'll show you how it looks. So I've made a weird kind of map out there for Asia, and similarly I've done for Australia and 2 or 3 other continents. And then I made a query out of this where I'm using querying all the continents, and I'm trying to display their polygons using the map format. This is the new feature, and when you save it, like you could did with points, you can now do with the shapes. Yeah. Sorry?
We moved Russia into Asia.
Yeah, too. It was really. This is mostly for smaller areas. Like it's really difficult to. There will be many points in there if I. Okay, so and then the next steps is like we are trying to display some semantics in here. Like when you have some project, then you can try to display semantic data in here. So this is next what is going on, and right now this is still all experimental. It's not in the development code in the main master branch. It's still in some other branch. We are planning to merge it soon. Okay, so the new things I've introduced are the form input, this one, and then like you can query the shapes. That is the new stuff. Okay, thanks.
Are there any questions to our 2 speakers, maybe about the maps, about this particular shaping feature? Yeah.
Concerning the OpenLayers integration, if it is possible in maps to configure your own base maps, like when I have an own tiled map service running and I want to have this in my Semantic MediaWiki, would I have to go directly into the OpenLayers code, or is there some configurability from the UI?
That allows you to get data from several mapping services, but I've never tried this out with my own tile server, and I'm not sure anybody tried this yet. So in theory, it's definitely possible. In practice, I'm not sure it's currently working, but if it's not, it probably is not that hard to get it to work.
So my question was, if there is an interface from the extension where I can enter the URL for my service, or would I have to go into the OpenLayers file and enter it yourself?
There is an interface in the extension, but like I said, I'm not completely sure it works for any OpenLayers map tile server.
About future perspective on querying polygon data. As you said, currently it's stored as a blob because you could store it with all the polygon points individually, of course, but it would still be difficult to execute queries for the interior or anything like that. Do you see any way to make that possible at some point? Or is that just too badly supported in the database side to really get running?
I think currently you can like only query with other properties. Like you can't specify a like round box where you want to display all the polygons that are falling in the box. There's no such thing. You can only like I did was I used the category continents stuff. So there's no support for such stuff. So right now it's blob is fine for us. Yeah, but if you want to make those features, I think using a blob will do, because like if you try to use it as like we thought of a sub-object, making a sub-object out of it and like putting all of the data, we'll still have to extract all the data out of all the tables, and then we'll have to like query on them. And if you have a blob, then you can extract the blob and make a structure out of it, a object, and then you can again do the same. So I think a blob is still better for us right now. Right.
My question was maybe slightly different.
Okay.
If you wanted to query for like all the points in a certain polygon,
okay,
of course you can extract the polygon and look at all points.
Okay,
and
okay.
check if they are in or not. But this will take ages and not be performing.
Yeah, yes,
Is
yes.
there any hope to get this done on a database level? I don't see how to do that in an efficient query like geographic support.
Yeah, in database level, I'm not sure it can be done that easily, but we can do it in the code, in the PHP code. We can do it that way, because
That is small enough.
yeah, that's there.
Yeah, this is not really something that needs to be done in semantic maps, right? I mean, it's basically the SMW store that needs to support proper geospatial indexing.
Which is basically MySQL into the board.
Yeah, MySQL has some kind of spatial indexing, but we would need, you need an MySQL extension for this. And several other databases also support this. I mean, Postgres has something quite good, I've heard. And Solar can do this as well, I think. Well, I've heard this recently, not sure, but yeah.
Maybe follow up on the question. So there is the vocabulary, the Neo-Geo vocabulary that is created by a consortium of how to represent geospatial information in RDF. So this might be one of the possibilities to have a further abstraction from the pure point data and to store that in semantic MediaWiki to have more expressive queries. So something like which cities are more to the west from Berlin. Things like that. That would be awesome to connect that spatial information more with semantics. Would be cool. So if you want to have some information about Neo-Geo, come to me. Andreas Hart from our institute is working on that, so we could get some connection.
Just minor remark, because that was about RDF. Indeed, at the moment, geo coordinates are not supported in our RDF export very well, which means not at all. But we would like to, because there are too many ways of doing it in RDF, and we didn't decide which one we want to have yet. I will talk to you.
Yeah, I have one small quick note on that. If you just want to get all the points west of something, you can already do this, but just comparing the latitude or longitude. I forgot. Yeah, well.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I have one. These polygons feature, if I use polygons, for example, for representing buildings or some kind of parks, some small object, relatively small object, and I zoom out, will they be clustered to the points and then to the clusters? So I think it's a quite natural thing.
As far as I know, the marker cluster feature only supports points at this moment, so the polygons will not be clustered together. And also important to keep in mind here is that marker cluster only works on Google Maps, while the polygon support is on both Google Maps and OpenLayers.
The map editor is not supported.
The map editor at the moment only supports Google Maps, so you cannot use the map editor with OpenLayers in it. But you can, of course, use it together with OpenLayers, so you can generate the code in the map editor, which is using Google Maps, and then just change the mapping service of the resulting map code and set that to OpenLayers. That will work perfectly fine.